Hello and welcome to another episode of Nothing Ventured with me, Aarish Shah. Today in the studio with me, I have Chris Sheldrick. Chris is the co-founder and CEO of What3Words, a global addressing system that converts locations into 3 unique words. After frustration in the music business with traditional addresses, he and his team created a way to name every 3-meter square on Earth. Headquartered in London, What3Words has partnered with major companies like Intel and Mercedes. Chris also holds the title of Schwab Social Entrepreneur with the World Economic Forum and has been a TED speaker since 2017. His journey reveals insights into navigating unique challenges in the tech space. In today's episode, we talk about how running music events was the genesis of What3Words, why Chris decided words were the right medium over numbers.
How do you express really large amount of information in something very compact?
How 40,000 words are enough to cover the 57 trillion 3-meter squares in the world.
We use 40,000 words. That is enough to cover the Earth's surface. That gives you 64 trillion combinations.
How addresses were not envisaged with navigation in mind, and how you need consumers and businesses to generate network effects.
To get a standard like What3Words used, you need to have the network effect from both.
How What3Words is solving precise addresses for AI using AI.
We are solving a great problem in AI, which is that precise addresses are not really well supported.
And how postcodes were set up to sort mail, never to find places.
It was made for a completely different purpose, which was to sort mail.
Right. Let's get straight into it. Hey guys, whilst I've got you for a second, I thought I'd reintroduce myself. My name's Aarish. I am the host of Nothing Ventured, the podcast where I talk to the people behind the stories that make the venture ecosystem go round. I'm also the founder of Emerge One, a consultancy that provides fractional CFO services to venture-backed tech startups from seed to Series B and beyond. If you enjoy the podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could like, rate, and subscribe wherever it is that you listen. And if you want to talk to me about anything at all, do reach out to me on LinkedIn or X. I'm always up for a bit of a natter. Right, let's get back to it. Chris, really great to have you in the studio with me. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks so much, Aarish. Great to be here.
Amazing. Well, look, you mentioned What3Words as a solution for communication in the developing world. How do you assess the balance between ease of adoption and the risks of reliance on technology in areas with limited infrastructure? I'm thinking about, rural places. I mean, I've lived out in Papua New Guinea. I'm from Africa. There are presumably some difficulties, I guess, in not only adopting but utilizing tech in these sort of places. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think address systems is something that every country struggles with in a different way, but also something which hasn't really changed a lot over the years. So even in the English countryside, there are still plenty of houses that just have a house name, no house number, and it can be tricky to explain where that is. I'm from a small village where that problem exists, and that problem is very, very prevalent in much of the developing world, where even in the big towns and cities, maybe the address system is very informal or just simply doesn't exist. So I think What3Words is great in that it works everywhere. It's in 61 languages. So whatever country you're in, we really want to make it something that people can use in their first language ultimately. But in terms of tech infrastructure, sure, there will be some places which have less connectivity than others, but important to say What3Words can work completely offline. So even if you've got no data connection at all on your phone, sure, you will need a data connection to first of all get the app. But once you have it, you can find the 3-word address wherever you are without a connection. So in my view, that makes it very suitable for anywhere where that connectivity is still an issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember, right? How old is the business now?
13 years old.
Yeah. So I would have been in Papua New Guinea when I first heard about What3Words. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, this is really important for a place like Papua New Guinea where you have a multitude. I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but it's probably something like 90+% of the population live in rural areas, some of them in very remote villages and, very hard to reach places without a plane or a helicopter, et cetera, et cetera. And if you think about needing to transport medical supplies or potentially, solve damage to the highway, right, which was constantly crumbling, but you need to know exactly where and what and how to drop stuff into the right area. I was like, wow, this could be really powerful for a place like that. Is that kind of the thinking that you had? Was that maybe the core premise, or was it more generally just like, we need to make addressing simpler for everyone?
I see what you mean. I think it was a bit of both. So one good thing about the music business is that you get to go to a lot of different places. So one day you're in the English countryside doing a music festival. And then I remember I did a gig in Katsina in Nigeria, which is a town right up the north.
Okay.
And I remember sort of asking for the address for the gig, and the guy just looked at me and was like, as in like, why are you asking for one? There's clearly no addresses here. Just
behind the bridge left of
and so people smile because it's sort
yeah.
of like the local cultural way is just not, you wouldn't use an address, you'd use directions. And so I guess I knew the breadth of the problem from my time in the music business, because we went to so many different kind of places, that when we started the business, it was intentionally going to be for everywhere. And so making multiple language versions was something that we wanted to do as soon as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, going back to that question about tech infrastructure, et cetera, now you've got Starlink, et cetera. So actually internet connectivity has improved and will continue to improve. And again, you and I were talking about this a bit earlier, tech adoption, even amongst younger people, and by younger people, I mean children, essentially, is now, they're natively, they are native tech users. And I guess that, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that when Google Maps first appeared on my phone, it was a life changer for me, because I'm not very spatially aware. Reading a physical map was problematic for me. Like, I would really struggle with like, okay, I've got to go from this page to that page, and I've got to figure out the route and all the rest of it. And so what strikes me is that actually this not only makes it easier to find places, but it actually opens up the world for a lot of people who otherwise may have struggled in the past, right?
That's certainly the idea. And I think it's the idea of What3Words is that it's a kind of cross-platform, cross anything. You can speak it, you can type it, you can scan it with your phone, you can use it on different platforms. And that's the idea of it. I mean, I remember before I started the business and I was trying to get latitude and longitude used in the music world, I was kind of the number one advocate for it in the London music business. And then I'd be sending people, Google Maps links. And then, I remember like a bass player saying, well, I don't use Google Maps. Yeah. And I was like, well, it sort of seemed like a preference, and he just didn't want to use it. And so he wanted to use something else. And then I was like, okay, I need to have something which works here. And then some people would say, I've got no data. And so all of these became my criteria. Like, if you want to get something used as a new system, it has to work across everything.
And it has to be easy enough that it's not going to be challenging for anyone to switch either, right?
Exactly. And one of the things people ask us a lot is why the similar word combinations are not near each other. And it was all down to an issue I'd had with someone who was actually very happy to use lat long. I was delighted. It was a truck driver. We did a gig in Italy. He drove all the gear from the UK. And he asked me for latitude, longitude. I thought, brilliant, this guy's exactly the kind of person I want with that level of precision. But he mixed up 2 digits in the latitude, ended up now north of Rome, not south of Rome, which was problematic. And so in my mind, it was really a sort of defining principle of how we made it, to make it as unlikely as possible that you'd have 2 similar 3-word addresses in the same place. So the overwhelming majority of occasions, you'll find that if you make a slight mistake, you might end up in another county, another country, which again is all back to it feeling simple for the user, that if you make typos or any mistakes, or if you're lazy, the system should be able to automatically correct you, which is what we aspire to.
I mean, at the end of the day, human beings are communicating animals, right? Like this is the reality. I mean, the reason OpenAI and ChatGPT took the world by storm was because all of a sudden you could conversationally have a conversation, right, with a machine, which up until that point was a black box for the vast majority of people, right? And it's natural, right? It's natural for people to use language to describe ideas, to describe places, and even like I wasn't joking when you were talking about Nigeria. Directions in India or in Nigeria or in Kenya often are, you go past the church here, turn left onto the dirt road, and it's behind the tannery factory in rural wherever, right? So So describing it is a natural kind of way in any case, right? And actually talking about AI, and how can you not in 2026, I guess, as What3Words integrates AI into the product. What are the challenges that arise when you're attempting to kind of scale a system that was designed for both individual users as well as businesses? And how do those challenges differ in various regions globally?
So I think it's an interesting point about individual consumers and businesses, because to get a standard like What3Words used, you need to have the network effect from both. So there's many businesses where it's been sort of established that you need two sides, right? So if you've got Uber, you need a driver and a rider who both want to do something at the same time. With What3Words, you've got kind of a few different sides to that. You've got someone who's going to share a 3-word address. You've got to have someone who then wants to use a 3-word address. But you've also at the same time got to have a business in the middle, let's say a delivery company that's going to accept that 3-word address as well, or a car navigation system where you can use it. So we have to build all sides of that ecosystem together. And that's kind of how it took off in the UK, is that we got sort of a critical mass of businesses who would accept it, a critical mass of users who would put it on their website saying, this is the precise entrance to this place, and enough consumers who knew what the system was, had the app on their phone, that you managed to get it all working in tandem. And I'm sure there are other businesses with the same hurdle of having this kind of multi-pronged network effect. But once you get it, it's incredibly powerful, because it's sort of like that's how you really launch in as a de facto standard. And so I would say that is a critical part of our growth has been, there's a portion of the company who will work on consumer adoption and then a portion who will work on business adoption. With quite different strategies.
Yeah, of course. And so, I mean, without necessarily giving away the secret sauce, I mean, how is it that you are bringing AI into the product? Because I mean, again, as you and I both know, that lots of products are kind of AI for AI's sake. Where does that actually create value for you?
So I think from our point of view, so addresses and AI actually is something which at the moment doesn't work that well. So I think most of the LLMs, they have a concept of where certain places are spatially, but in terms of precise locations, this is not something which seems to work very well today in AI products. For one thing, I don't think the major LLMs are actually trying to procure data sets in that way. They're not trying to know where number 42 on a certain street is.
Yeah.
They, I believe, are leaving that up to the application layer to solve and then plug in different data sets. So from What3Words' perspective, we are saying, well, look, if you just want to say, I want to go here now with an Uber, you should be able to say, I want to go to word with an Uber. And it should be that simple. You should be able to word the query how you like. In the past, let's say in car navigation, you would have to say very specifically, navigate with What3Words, word.
Got it.
And it's kind of a lot for the user to have to think about in advance, even though it worked. Whereas now you can do it in your own language. You can give that precise 3-word address. And what will happen in the back end, it'll convert it to a latitude, longitude, and then your Uber will drop you at exactly that 3 meter square. So from our point of view, we are solving a great problem in AI, which is that precise addresses are not really well supported. And we, I think, are one of the first with a really sort of fully fledged AI system, both for text and voice input, where that will work pretty seamlessly.
I mean, thinking about it, I drive a Tesla, sorry. But, I'll be like, navigate to postcode, right? Would be the normal thing. But occasionally I can't remember the postcode, or, someone's given me an address, but not the postcode or whatever. And it'll definitely mangle. Like you could end up in any one, obviously in the UK and in London, you may have multiple addresses with the same road name or street name or whatever. And then you've got to figure out which is the right one. Okay, well, this is NW and this is EN. Okay, so actually I think it's this one because that feels like it's Harrow postcode. But if I don't know what the postcode for that area is, I could imagine, it hasn't happened yet, but I could well imagine, given how directionally challenged I am, navigating to completely the wrong place. And so what you're saying is essentially that takes away that difficulty because it gives precision, right?
I think we're taking away the difficulty of having to rely on something which is inaccurate, like the postcode. I mean, bearing in mind that the UK postcode, as prevalent as it is, it was made for a completely different purpose, which was to sort mail.
Yes.
It was never intended as a way to navigate to places. So most of our deliveries where we are in in Paddington in London, they will actually go to the A40 flyover, which is kind of like a motorway near our office, just because that's where the postcode often snaps to. And it wasn't made to be precise. And then, in the village where I live, loads of people share a postcode. So postcodes work in some senses, but it is stunning to me that we're in 2026, and yet they are sort of still used with an sort of expectation of, oh, it doesn't quite work. But I think, certainly in the UK, What3Words is becoming more and more used, where people know that the postcode is not good enough.
And actually, sorry, I mean, like, just whilst you were saying that, I saw, so I live in a development that was a new development that used to be in our army barracks. So the postcodes were created for that. So our postcode, I think it's now across pretty much all systems is recognized, but actually for a long while, mapping systems would not know what that postcode related to because it just didn't exist.
Yeah, that's true. And so in the UK, I think it takes about 6 months, certainly in a new build as well, to get your postcode on the system. So I mean, it's a good system. It was built in the 60s and 70s for what it was for. But in 2026, it feels like you should be able to go anywhere, even if you just want to go to a gate, which will never have a postcode. I live on a farm, and most of the time you're trying to get people to a specific gate or a place, which won't have an address or a postcode. And so you want something which is akin to a latitude and longitude. It's a position on the Earth, and we want to enable that to happen as easily as possible. So, I mean, to your example of being in your car or whatever vehicle or whatever you're going to get into, soon enough it'll be in a Waymo or something else.
Sure.
You just want to be precise. And in fact, if you're in an autonomous car, probably matters more than ever. Because once the car sort of stops and goes, I'm here, it's going to be very important where here is.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, even the other day, as I mentioned to you earlier, I was at an event and I had a couple of team members that were coming out. And one of the team members actually texted me, was like, I don't know where this place is, like literally. And it was on Piccadilly, one of the most famous, most traveled, most sort of frequented kind of roads in London for sure, right? But this bar, as it happened to be, was kind of nestled away, and it wasn't very obvious where it was, and so she'd kind of shot past it and didn't know where. So I found myself on the phone with her, kind of waving my hand in the air, to say, well, this is where it is, because
this was my old job basically in the music world. But yes, and,
right.
and in my world, someone would have like a car full of drums or a bass amp, which is the heaviest thing known to mankind. So
so if you can't park right by the plate, like it's problematic to say the least, right?
But I guess for me, it's just the disconnect of so much about the world as efficient in the year 2026. Yet, if you're using something imprecise for location, you'll still have all these difficulties. So whether it's developing world, developed world, in my view, it's good to have something simple. And with the AI products that we're bringing out at the moment, it should be as effortless as just picking up a device and speaking X about the 3-word address that you want to talk about, and it should be understood first time. That for us is where we see the future going.
Slightly geeky question. I mean, how many word combinations are there? You're a mathematician, right, by training?
Actually, my co-founder Mohan is the far better mathematician, but I do know how many combinations we have. So we use 40,000 words. That is enough to cover the Earth's surface. That gives you 64 trillion combinations. So it's 40,000 cubed of 3 words. There are only 57 trillion 3-meter squares in the world. So you've got a few trillion word combinations left over. But those are the rough maths. And I guess the whole idea and concept hinges off the fact that such a small number of words in the sequence leads to such a huge number of combinations. It's sort of the key part of the system. Had we needed 4 words, I'm not actually sure we would have started the company, because 4 words starts to get tricky, but 3 feels simple. And
it's easy. I can't remember. I had learned about this in the past, like how many numbers one can recall. My kids, for example, don't remember telephone numbers, right? Whereas I'm sure you and I would have known off by heart our best mate's numbers or our home number or whatever, right? But my kids don't. Well, certainly one of them doesn't. But there is a limit to to the amount of data you can hold in memory at that point in time. Right?
And in fact, I mean, there was some research done. It's either the 60s or 70s. There was a professor of York University called Alan Baddeley who actually did the research on this. And it's all about, as you say, sort of short-term memory recall.
Yeah.
How many numbers, how many letters, and how many words is what they tested. And I think we have some literature on our website because the recall for 3 words is basically perfect. But to express the same location as something like a latitude and longitude or an alphanumeric code, you need something like 16 digits of lat long or 10 alphanumeric characters, and recall for that is near 0. So it's kind of interesting that to express the same thing in 2 different ways, one of them is near perfect and one of them is near 0. That's why we've gone for the near perfect recall option. And I remember we went to see the same professor in the early days. He was one of the people they consulted on how the British postcode was made up. So the fact that it is in the form SW1A, 1AA, or however it is, it was something that was deeply considered at the time to make it as memorable as possible.
Because it wouldn't have worked if it was probably 6 digits.
Yeah,
for example.
Exactly. And I think it, depending on which way you put the numbers and the characters, the human brain sort of operates differently around them. So it really matters. But I mean, again, to my co-founder Mohan's credit, I think he'd actually read the paper in question. So when the idea came about, it sort of sounds simple in retrospect. Oh, just do it in 3 words. But I think he was thinking of exactly that. How do you express a really large amount of information in something very compact? And I guess, I mean, there's all sorts of other ways it's used. Cryptocurrency seed phrases, right?
Sure.
It's a combination of
Those
words.
Are like 11 words, bloody impossible to remember. Yeah.
But I think what it's really representing is a very, very, very long number.
It's a hash.
So the same technique is used for other things. It's just the world is a very convenient size to be able to do it in 3 words for location.
Yeah, no, I think that's like, for me, that's super interesting because I mean, again, it's not something certainly that I would have thought of, but it works, right? Like, I mean, this is reality. I mean, like I have a client, I was at their offices yesterday. He religiously only sends me What3Words addresses. And it works, right? And especially where you have like multiple entrances and different kind of, areas that you could go to, et cetera, or even, I'm just thinking about, you're at a festival, right? Like, and you're trying to meet up with your mates, it's no longer, if you can see the big tree go 100 paces behind that, and we're next to the tent where they're serving champagne in front of the main stage, you can literally just say, I'm here, like literally I can give you the exact precise location to where I am.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because for a lot of people, and when we think about behavior change, so you've got to think about when people first learn about the system, because often you'll get greeted with the sort of, that's an intriguing idea when you first learn about the system. But there's still then a way to go from that to everyday usage. Yeah. And so what we're thinking about is, okay, when will people first try it out? And a festival is quite a common example of where people first try it out. And then we're thinking about habitual use. And that can be for something like your delivery. So if you get into the mindset of every delivery I'm going to get, I'm just going to add it to the notes just to make sure that they find the right door. So that's when you just kind of get the repetition. And as per your example of somebody you saw yesterday who you say religiously sort of sends you the 3-word addresses, that's when you then sort of get the full migration to, well, I'm always going to use What3Words because I've gone from concept, intrigue, understanding, tried it a few times, and then religiously using it. But with something like this, which is a quirky idea, that journey is important because ultimately, before we became as well known as we are in the UK, it was kind of odd to say to someone, just find me, avocado, banana, spoon. It can sound a bit strange. Yeah. So you've sort of got to have your advocate group, if you like, who are completely happy and confident to lead the way.
Yeah, it's that early adopter
with
kind of mentality.
Avocado, banana, spoon. But the quirkier the idea, that extra bit can become a hurdle as well. So you want to make it feel as safe and as easy for people to start doing it in their everyday life. And then that's when the big adoption comes.
So and again, just to round this bit off, because I'm, like, again, as you've been speaking, I was just like, oh shit, like over Christmas and actually regularly, because of the block that we're in, which has like several entrances, as in there are 4 cores to the apartment block, but each has a separate entrance. Like we get deliveries not even sent to the wrong core, literally to the wrong building, because the whole development is like lots of different apartment blocks. And I honestly had never thought about just putting that in the delivery instructions. And now I am going to do, like, literally after we've stopped talking, I'm going to go home, say to my wife, right, from now on in, this is what we're putting in the delivery instructions, because hopefully that will give Amazon or DPD or whoever it is. And this is the question, right? If that's in the delivery instructions, will they use it? And why is that not the default delivery the default delivery mechanism?
So I think there's a couple of bits to that. So there's the kind of official adoption by the companies themselves. So the DHLs, the DPDs, where What3Words is an option in their app where you can go and preset it. It's got its own dedicated field, and it will go straight through the driver's device, very slick. And then there's the e-commerce and delivery sites where it's probably more informal. So I know that my mum, when she orders her groceries online, she'll put the 3 words in, even if it's a business who doesn't officially support it, but the driver will get there and go, oh, I'm so pleased that you put the 3 words in. Because they'll just read it in free text. They might have to then copy, paste it into the What3Words app. It's a little bit more of a hassle for them, but ultimately it'll still mean that it works. So both options work, I guess, certainly in the UK where we're incredibly well known.
Yeah, no, I'm going to see whether that improves our rates of delivery. Moving on a little bit, right? You could argue, and some certainly do argue, that simplifying address systems could unintentionally marginalize local standards and practices. I'm not sure I'd be an advocate for that, but where do you see the boundaries between standardization and localization being pushed too far?
I think we're not. I mean, we use the term address system because it's probably the closest, and we use addressing and address in a lot of our terminology as a business, because you've got to pick something that is in people's minds. We're probably closer in practice to a coordinate system, but we don't say that because people, I think, often feel like coordinates are inextricably linked to numbers.
Yeah.
And also, perhaps your average consumer is not thinking, I need a coordinate system in my life, or do I use one?
No, you think about addresses. That's it.
So we use address, but then it kind of does sometimes beg the question you just posed, which is, well, there's already an address. But addresses, again, I guess, were not really envisaged with navigation in mind. And there's so many kind of exceptions that break the rules about addresses. So we don't want to rename any streets. We don't want to rename any areas or houses, and are not suggesting that people don't use an address for where it has a value, which is many things which is not to do with navigation yet. We're really interested in the bit of getting there.
Yeah.
So I think the two coexist perfectly well. And so I think it's something that sometimes comes up in conversation as, is this a problem? But in reality, the address you would use for some things, and then for navigation, we'd love people to think of What3Words.
Yeah. I mean, actually, the way I would think about it is also that's a first world problem, right? Like, I mean, in the sense that exactly to your point, in the UK, we have these, we have coexisting systems. You have longitude, latitude, you have postcodes, you have, et cetera, and then you have What3Words, right? But again, going back to that earlier point around behind the church, left of the cornfield, in rural Kigali or whatever, you don't have those systems necessarily in place, right? And in fact, actually, you don't have any systems, and therefore this becomes a de facto potential primary system for those sort of locations. So I think exactly to your point, this is about how do you find a place or a person, rather than how do you necessarily become the de facto kind of naming system.
Yeah, and it depends on the country, because I think in the UK there is this sense, a bit like your example of how your property took a few months to get registered, but then once you're registered, it is on a list of verified addresses. Now, many countries don't have such a list. So in one of the countries where we're used a lot, Mongolia, there's a business there, Ard Credit. They were the first financial business to use us there, and their point was, look, we've got a lot of people. It's a nomadic population, and so if we want to give credit, there is to somebody who is a herder who maybe even moves seasonally. There's no semblance of an address for them. they can use a 3-word address to actually verify their location if there is no alternative. Now, that would be different in the UK, where ultimately every residence is going to end up on the official register. But in many countries, that's not the case. So I think there are uses where it can have something other than navigation as a way of doing that. And there are really innovative businesses like Our Credit in Mongolia who are doing that.
Yeah, but that's the nature of technology, right? Like you build to solve one problem, and others will find other problems that potentially can utilize it as well. I mean, the other question, I think you and I talked about this when we first spoke, right? Like, you have a view that legacy addressing systems are almost more of an obstacle than they are pure competition. How do you convince users and businesses to transition to What3Words without compromising their existing systems, especially when those systems have established trust? And like, I'm a perfect example. Like, I'm a hardcore, like, I won't use Apple Maps. I'm a Google Maps guy. That's all I use. It's baked into kind of pretty much everything that I do navigationally. And again, that's because, as I said earlier, Google Maps transformed my world a little bit, right? So yeah, how do you approach that? Because essentially you want them as partners, right? Not as competitors.
That's right. So I think from when a business chooses to integrate What3Words, what they're doing is that they're adding a field for What3Words. And the good thing about that means that you're not in any way interfering with their existing fields, so which they might have, address line 1, address line 2, city, postcode. And we're saying, like, don't repurpose any existing field, make a new field for What3Words, and then it doesn't get in the way. And so every time someone adds one, that's great because you have more precise information than you did. But because you haven't had to change anything, it doesn't really threaten your existing workflows. And so I guess that's why we would think, as you put it, it's not, we don't have, like, the address system is not a competitor to us. We think more info can only be a good thing. So if you have an address and What3Words and you want to get somewhere and you're, let's say, a delivery person, great. You'll use that info as you want to. So everything's about adding support for What3Words rather than removing support for something else.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because if I think about it again, right? So if using the Amazon delivery as an example, right? If I put a What3Words address in there, that's great. That'll get them to the place. But to ensure that they're at the right place, they want to know that this is flat X in block Y of this street of this, of this physical address, right? Like it acts as a reinforcement rather than
Exactly. And so for the delivery use case, especially if you're in a block of flats, because What3Words is going to get you to the right entrance, and then the flat number you'll need to provide that on top of the What3Words because we're going to get you to the 3 meter square. So yeah, anything which helps solidify this is the right place is a good thing. So yeah, for delivery, adding a What3Words address, the way to think about it. For in-car navigation, or many kind of ride-hailing use cases, a 3-word address will often be sufficient on its own. So it depends on the use case.
Yeah, no, and I mean, now my mind is starting to think about all the other ways that I would potentially think about using it as well. I mean, I'm going to add this question in. I know you and I somewhat talked about this. I mean, I think about What3Words almost as like as a utility, right? How do you think about that? Like, is this a nation state adoption type product?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you're sort of, you're putting in the utility category because really we don't always have a category. In fact, we're just about to bring an app out for the new car navigation systems, which are built on AAOS, which stands for Android Automotive Operating System. And in some ways, there isn't a natural category for us to fit into because we're not doing the turn-by-turn navigation. We do a specific bit in that flow. And so whenever we are trying to do categories, there isn't one category. Utility very much fits the bill for how a lot of people use us. But then I guess sometimes we're in maps or nav, but sort of not quite. But I think we've also just become very comfortable with not trying to fit into one thing because
you are what you are.
Because we're across so much. I mean, if you were to talk about and think about what category do addresses go in, it's like, well, it's kind of across loads. And so that category, you start off by thinking, oh, we don't fit into a category, but it's actually a very good thing because it just broadens the scope of what you can be integrated into.
And I guess the final question, not to kind of push you too much on this, but what is the vision? I mean, I think you said you're in 61 countries already, or 61 languages rather. Is the vision to be in 194 whatever it is countries in all languages?
So absolutely, it's more countries, more integrations where adoption feels like it now does in the UK, where the brand and the system is so well known and so well used. That's exactly what we're doing. So What3Words works in every country in the world. In fact, even in the ocean. So every 3 meter square is covered. And when we launch a new language, we launch in all countries so that you can use, I don't know, the Hindi version, let's say, in wherever you go in the world, even in the Brazilian rainforest, there'll be 3 Hindi words.
Right. So I was going to ask, so if my location is, for argument's sake, Pod Tree Lake, then in Swahili it would be Pod Tree Lake, or it would be a different set of 3 words?
Different set of 3 words. So not every word in the world has a direct translation.
Yeah, sure.
And also we give the easier words in a language to the place they're more likely to be used. So let's take your example of the Swahili version. We'd probably put the easiest words in Kenya, Tanzania, other countries where Swahili is a usual language to communicate in. But I think from our point of view, yes, it's partly is about doing the tech bit to make sure the languages are done, but then it's the adoption bit to follow. So we see a world where wherever you are in the world, if you see those 3 words, the 3 slashes, the dots, you know what it is, you know how to use it. And then it's become a totally global de facto system. That's our ambition.
Definition of a utility. Okay, Chris, this has been an awesome conversation. I have a couple of more questions, which we ask all of our guests. What is one thing that you have a contrarian conviction about from any area of life, whether that's work, politics, socially, or at home?
Well, I would say from a contrarian point of view, we've grown our company in plenty of unorthodox ways, but one of the ways which I think I'm most proud about is how we've got several offices around the world, and many of them in what may be considered unconventional locations. So I mentioned Mongolia earlier. It was the first country where we had a sort of a government department. It was the Mongolian Postal Service who started using What3Words. And we brought on board a team of I think 1, maybe then 2 in Mongolia. But actually we rapidly scaled out that team to what is now about 30 people. And they help the company on far more than just our outreach in Mongolia. And we have an office in Vietnam as well. We have an office in Trinidad and Tobago. And a lot of these have sort of come by, not exactly by chance, but just the way that sort of business and travels and trips take you. But from our point of view, it's stunning to me how few companies, certainly tech companies, have an office. Let's take Mongolia as an example. Basically no Western tech companies there. And so we have an amazing pool of talent that we draw on there in UB, as it's known, the capital. And it's been of great benefit to What3Words that we have such a diverse global workforce. But it's kind of interesting to me that no other companies have used it as a hub, given the talent on offer there. But sort of it's been more benefit to us. We're able to hire really outstanding people.
Yeah, you've just given away your secret sauce.
Well, I have, but it's amazing the amount of people I also say this to, who then also don't go on to consider Mongolia, because in some ways it's sort of, it's a remote place, small population, and a lot of people are like, why there? But, to which my answer would be, why not?
Yeah.
And I would just say it seems to be contrarian. I don't know why, but it seems to be. But from my perspective, you want to make the objective right decisions rather than thinking, well, that's a bit different, so maybe I shan't do it. There's plenty of opportunity in those kind of situations.
I completely agree with you. I'm like, what strikes me is, especially in a during and post-COVID kind of era, where remote work became de facto how companies operated. And I would still say, whilst there's been a bit of a return to the office, it's still very much hybrid, right? I would say, but certainly most of the kind of tech businesses that we work with are very much hybrid, potentially even remote first, right? And and therefore the world is at your fingertips in the sense of the talent that you can, you can bring in can literally come from anywhere that you want. And therefore, why not take advantage of access to that talent? But I think I would hazard the guess that what stops most people is a level of discomfort in terms of, okay, it's a bit remote, it's a bit further away. I don't know the culture. I don't know what the language constraints might be, et cetera, et cetera. And, let's face it, it's easier to look closer to home. But actually, I mean, we do this in my business, we absolutely don't really care where, we have people from Philippines, Singapore. We'll likely hire in a couple of people from Kenya or South Africa, et cetera, et cetera. From my perspective, you go where you can get best value for money and best in class talent, right? Like that. Ultimately, if you want to build an amazing business, that's what you've got to do.
Absolutely. And in our case, as with many businesses, if you're dealing with consumers or businesses who might sign up for your product at any time of the day, we want to have as close to 24-hour coverage as possible. So that if anyone's got any kind of query, we can get back to them in as close to real time as possible. So from Mongolia, which is generally plus 7 or 8 hours, I think, from UK, and Trinidad and Tobago, I think either 4 or 5 behind.
Hours, I think,
yeah, we've got most time zones, bar a couple of hours, covered. And yeah, I mean, it's been a phenomenal enabler for us, being able to be that responsive to customers in a way that hasn't been complex. We're still a small-ish company. But I think you can do that if you really pride yourself on as close to a 24/7 or let's say 24/5 service as possible. It can be done.
Yeah, amazing. And one final question, so that we can get to know the real you. Although I think again, this conversation has probably given us, if not glimpses, then a pretty good idea. What is something that moves you emotionally?
I would say for me, it's got to be music. I spent my whole life growing up in classical music. I decided, I mean, I was into computers as well when I was young, and so I was going to deciding, musical computers, and chose music because that was my biggest passion at the time. And it's something where I think music moves people differently, but for me, it's an amazing kind of spiritual thing to listen to music live or recorded. And it's something I can kind of take with me. I do a lot of travel in my job. I'm in all corners of the world. And the further you travel, especially if you're used to the adrenaline of having your business going during the UK working day, when you're 8 hours ahead, you're often quite isolated because your big sort of thriving office at home is not yet awake for the day. And music is a great comfort to me. It's something I've had all my life. And so whilst I now no longer work in music, and that abrupt cut-off when I started What3Words was abrupt, it's something which, gives me great enjoyment and comfort wherever I am.
Do you play instruments or?
Yeah, I do. I mean, sadly, I had, just after I graduated, actually, I have a sleepwalking disorder, punch through a window whilst asleep. And nearly died, cut a lot of my left wrist. And so there are 2 fingers here that don't work. But I can still sort of get around a piano enough for sort of enjoyment, if not anywhere near professional level. But it's something I enjoy doing a lot because it reminds me of all sorts of things growing up. I loved the kind of discipline that music brought me in. So I will occasionally sit down, and if one of those things, if you're in a hotel in a remote place, you'll sort of seek out the 4th floor, play a few notes on the piano, and I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I sadly, despite having learned both piano and flute for probably, I don't know, well, certainly over a decade, have not played in over 3 decades, or certainly 2.5 decades. And it is something that I miss. Like it's because to your point, right? I mean, music can take you back, it can create emotion, but it's also very cathartic. And to your point, like, it's practicing can be quite regimented, but it gets you into a flow which is, not akin to therapy, I guess, in some respects.
And I guess it took me also quite a while to realize that I will enjoy music differently to many other people. So most of my favorite songs, I've realized I don't even really know the words to. Whereas if you speak to most people, they will know the words to their favorite songs, and they find it sort of bizarre that I don't. And for me, it's just always been a thing where I'm listening to the notes, not consciously, very subconsciously, and therefore a lot of the words don't stay with me. So I like the fact everyone experiences music differently. I've realized that my way is not unique. I'm sure there's other people in my boat, but I'm comfortable with the fact that it's a bit different. But it is great that it's something I grew up in, and whilst I don't get to work in anymore, I enjoy it a lot.
Amazing. Chris, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. For the audience, are you available online? Where's the best place for them to find you on the internet? Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X rather? Where can they find you?
I'm on both of those platforms. You'll find me relatively easily. There aren't that many Chris Sheldricks in the world, although there is one notable other one who did study geography at the same university as me. And he in fact gave me the Chris Sheldrick Twitter handle, or X handle, I should say, a few years ago. So we keep in touch. So it's good to have a unique name, which is not that unique, but very decent of him. So I guess on that note, you can find me at Chris Sheldrick now on X, whereas I used to be Chris Sheldrick too. So there we go.
Okay, and I guess it would be incredibly wrong of me not to ask this as well. Where can they find What3Words using What3Words?
So you mean the location What3Words?
Yeah.
So because what is a homophone, you could spell it W-H-A-T, or the unit of power, W-A-T-T. It's actually one of the excluded words from our word list. So you won't be able to find it. Our auto suggest will probably, if you type it in, give you something which is ish around that, but you will not find What3Words exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, we shall do some delving. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really wonderful to have had you in the studio.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Aarish.